World Cup was clearly a victory for Vladimir Putin. The World Cup represented a culmination of Putin's project, which had been nearly 2 decades in the making. The return of Russia to the world stage as a great power to be respected, feared, and, as the World Cup showed, liked and even admired. Russia's reemergence as a major player capable of projecting power well beyond its immediate neighborhood was unexpected and quite remarkable, given its limited economic resources, a GDP smaller than Italy's, demographic decline, decaying infrastructure, and the negative impact of successive waves of Western sanctions in response to its actions. A few years before, President Obama had described Russia as a regional power, but Putin proved otherwise. Russia's reach is now clearly global. This is the new Russian reality that has developed since Putin entered the Kremlin in 2000. At that point, Russia was emerging from a decade of political chaos and an economic meltdown. Some went as far as to opine, Russia is finished. When an ailing Boris Yeltsin handed over the reins of power to a virtually unknown former KGB case officer, it was unclear how the fledgling post-communist Russia could move forward. In retrospect, it is clear that Putin was, from the start, determined not only to restore firm state control over the Russian polity, but also to resurrect Russia as a great power. Remarkably, he has been able to accomplish both of these goals, despite Russia's economic and military constraints. It is important to understand how and why Russia has returned to the world stage. It is now active in areas from which it withdrew after the USSR collapsed, and its reappearance has affected the ability of the United States and its allies to conduct their own foreign policy effectively. The new reality of Putin's world necessitates a rethinking of how to deal with Russia going forward. Putin's world is one in which relations with the United States and much of Europe are adversarial. It is also a world in which Russia has a deepening partnership with China, an increasingly influential role in the Middle East, and has returned to areas of the world from which Russia was forced to withdraw after the Soviet collapse. Moreover, Russia's seat and veto on the United Nations Security Council have enabled Moscow to exercise influence well beyond what its current capabilities would suggest. Russia's ability to thwart Western interests has also enabled it to advance its own interests internationally. Western attempts to isolate Russia after the seizure of Crimea have failed. Moreover, the increasing disarray in the transatlantic alliance since Donald Trump came to power, plus Brexit, Britain's decision to leave the European Union, and a European Union beset by new challenges, all these have provided Putin with unanticipated opportunities to advance Russia's interests, which he has skillfully utilized. This audiobook explains how Putin's Russia has managed to return as a global player and what that new role means. It examines why Moscow's relations with the U.S. and much, although not all, of Europe have deteriorated, and why so many other countries have a positive view of Russia and are working with Moscow productively in a variety of fora. The audiobook also traces the origins and development of the Russian national idea that has been consolidated in the nearly 2 decades Putin has been in power, and that drives policy today, highlighting how important it is to understand how and why Russia has reemerged, and how best to approach Moscow in this turbulent new global reality. It is customary to describe Russians as talented chess players with a grand strategy, but Putin's sport is judo, and that has given him a unique perspective on dealing with competitors and adversaries. Growing up poor in post-war Leningrad, martial arts transformed his life because it was a way of defending himself against larger, tougher boys who tried to beat him up. It was a tool to assert myself in the pack. The Leningrad evening paper in May 1976 introduced the 24-year-old master judoist to the city as not well known so far amongst specialists or fans, but predicted that would soon change. In judo,